Form has a vast meaning in visual art. Form does not necessarily mean that it is a shape always, it is rather a formation. To understand it in a simpler manner, I can just give you a few examples. Try to imagine if we start from a point and come back to the same point by traveling certain distance, it gives us a sense of a shape. Now, we are starting from one point and coming back to the same point, and we are covering an area that can be a circle or maybe a curvish rectilinear or curvilinear formation. Everything is a possibility there. Like as we write words, we use letters, those are also formations. We have a particular way of writing a particular thing. So, when we are creating a line on a paper, we make sure that it goes in one direction. So, these are the considerations that we have in a form. Now, for today's discussion, we are going to talk about the forms which are otherwise immobile, they are static. The reason I am saying that is like there are other forms which are also moving, or it gives you a sense of movement. It is not a real physical movement, but some illusion of movement. Those are the possibilities. So, let us explore. So, let us take example of a form which is otherwise solid. So, in this form, what we see is that the form has a volume. It has some light and shade rendering and other things that is falling on it. So, it gives us a sense of three dimensionality. It has a volume, it has a mass, and we can also associate this particular form with some form in nature. So, that way we know that this is one example of a form that looks like a recognizable object. Here it is a horse. Now, I will give you another variation of a similar object, but that is done in a different fashion. This is another example of an animal. It is a horse again, but it is done with a different way. So, we can call it a linear form if the previous one was a solid form. This form has a it occupies a visual area, it takes some space, but it does not have that much of a volume. It is not a solid form, rather it is a linear form. It is based on lines. Here it is a three dimensional physical object. So, the line is replaced by some wire. So, this is one formation that is also recognizable. It is semi abstract, but it is associable. So, it is a representational form. We have some reference to the form, we can recognize it as some form that is available in nature. Now, I will give you another variation of a similar object. This formation also tells you that this is having the same characteristic. It has 4 legs and 1 neck and maybe a head. It is again simplified, but it is not like they are based on planes. It does not have mass inside it, but it also gives you the association of the animal form that we have seen previously. So, we can create a form in many different ways. Let us see the 3 forms together and try to understand how they are in their physical characteristics. So, they are examples of solid form, the next is a linear form, and the last one is a form that is based on planes. This is linear for the time being, but the moment I add some texture into it, so, this is an example of a solid form where the contour is created. It is the delineation of the form is based on line, and it also has a surface. There can be many other solid forms. For example, so a contour with a surface can give us a sense of a solid form. So, this form is pyramidal, it is solid, it has a mass and it is done with the help of line, but still we cannot call it a linear form, because a linear formation will give you a different sense. A linear formation will try to create a volume with the help of line. So, it is not just the contour line, but it will give you a sense of line which will help it to form. So, a form like this can be still called a linear form. Let us come up with even more interesting examples, like when we have a formation of a letter. So, that is A, B, C or so on. These are nothing but a few lines that is moving from a particular direction, and thus the formation is taking place. So, these are examples of linear formation, and the difference between a solid formation and a linear formation is that the solid formation cannot be only based on line. It has to be given a sense of mass. By applying strokes, working on the lightened shed, so this way the form will transfer from a line drawing to a solid form. If we make images like this, which is based on a line that is starting from a point, ending in a point, but it is completely linear. We know that there are lots of empty areas, lots of air space in between it. So, there will be ample chance to see through images like this. Another example of a form with some balance, it may stand on the ground. So, that is another linear formation. So, these are some forms based on surface or plane. It has a lot of space which is void, that are enclosed, almost like an architectural formation where we have a space created with the suggestion of wall. Now, let us see how we associate forms, how we create analogy. Like a cuboid, if we create a cuboid, it will remind us of many other forms. So, what comes under the cuboid family will be a dice, There can be other examples. A cuboid can be also associable with an open book or a building. It can be associable with a paint stand or just a simple box. So, these forms are more or less analogous. So, that is how we create analogy in a form. Let us realize that with more examples. A circle can be associated with many other things like a ball, it can be also seen as a globe, a circular form in a torus shape will give us a sense of a wheel. A tire like formation, a basic cylinder will remind us of a crayon, a chalk, a straw, a can, a cup, or many other similar things. We think of a triangle, a square, a rectangle. We combine them so, a combination of a triangle and a square and a rectangle will give us some association of a heart. We can have another rectangle here in a different shape that will start looking like a door and nothing but it. A longer triangle, a circle, another circle, another circle, a larger circle, a crescent, a torus, will give us a different meaning to a form that is recognizable. It can be a mask, for a clown. Formation is based on several units, several shapes that we combine, we try to give it a different meaning. Because of the variation in combination, it may appear as different meanings. From there we derive to different analogies. There are forms which are analogous, means they are similar. The forms come under a particular group, a particular family. So, all the forms that are based on triangle will come under the family of a triangular form. The form which are otherwise circular, they will come under the form the family of circular forms. So, we go by the basic formations and we try to put them under certain families, certain groups, and we group them, we recognize them in some other meaning. So, form is also closely related to the style of execution that we have talked about in earlier lectures. When we explored the forms and styles, we talked about art and art styles. So, we can refer back to all those discussions and come back to the point again. So, let us take an example of a form which is like this. Perhaps it is a bottle. Another form with slight variation. Another form, trapezoidal. There can be another bottle like formation. So, all these forms belong to the same family because of their shapes, which are analogous, but they have different characteristic. You may say that this particular form is a male form and this particular form is a female form, with the reference that this particular form resembles a male torso and this form will resemble a female torso. So, here the shoulder part is wider than this. So, by those similarities, by those associations, we can always recognize a form as a male form and another one as a female form. There are many other examples that does not really have much of a direction, we cannot define them, but still that is how we understand them. Let us look at forms which are symmetrical from one particular view and asymmetrical from another angle. For example, this is a form with a handle, it is a cup or a mug, that is frontal. So, the moment I see it from another direction, I will see it differently. So, for me this is going to be the same cup viewed from a different angle. The symmetry will be totally removed. What we will see is a form in asymmetry. So, this form will be viewed from a different angle or a different viewpoint. There are products with asymmetry. So, if we say that this is one bottle which is asymmetrical in its shape, we can just change our viewpoint and see it from this order or even from this direction, and they will start looking symmetrical. So, that is how the static forms behave. An asymmetrical form has a sense of moving quality, it is more dynamic than the symmetrical form, but a form can be also looking different from different angles, and that is applicable for 3D forms. So, the static quality of a form is highly changeable. So, in our next lecture, we are going to find out how the static forms be given some kind of a dynamic look. So, what makes form more movable, and we are going to talk about the different kind of movements like the anticipated movements, there can be movements through repetition, and primarily we are going to explore how the use of line, the use of other elements may add movement, which is not a real physical movement, but a sense of movement, the illusion of movement to a form.